Justin, we just finished talking with author, leadership coach, head basketball coach, Brook Cupps. And I'll tell you what, it's always a highlight for me to talk to someone who I read 2 of his books over the Christmas break. And it's always fantastic that we get to jump on here and talk to someone who has impacted my coaching journey and helped me become better in my profession. So getting to talk to him face to face, really loved the conversation we had for the last little while.
The message in that book that he brought today was so strong, just about being your authentic self, learning how to compete and not compare, just having your core pillars on, on value-based leadership. There was so much there, success versus achievement and what that looked like. What I can't wait for people to hear is how Brook, for the last 25 years or so of coaching high school basketball, how he's adopted selecting his team captains. I think that will really surprise people, especially hearing that, he's been a state champion here.
Oh, it's going to be fantastic. And it's a fantastic listen. And for those of you that love reading, the books are fantastic as well. And The Surrender the Outcome, written in a fable type way, and really easy reading, but hard hitting and convicting. And I highly encourage people to check it out.
Yeah. So tough, passionate, unified, thankful. I think you're going to feel all those as you listen to this episode next. Welcome to the Grit and Growth Podcast, where we are in the pursuit of excellence in both sport and life. My name is Justin Simpkins, Director of Prairie Hockey Academy.
And I'm Shane Sowden, Head Men's Basketball Coach at Briarcrest College.
Brook, welcome to the Grit and Growth Podcast. We are thrilled to have you join us. As Shane and I both read your book and listened to some of the podcasts, this has been an interview that we've been really excited to bring to our listeners today. And I think, as we get started, we've done a brief intro about you, but tell us a little bit about where you are today. And I know, coaching basketball, mentor and leadership coach as well, but maybe a bit more about what you're doing with your time these days.
Yeah. So, coaching still eats up most of my time. I'm a high school basketball coach in Centerville, just outside of Dayton, Ohio. Working now, I've taught for 25 years, and this is my first year out of the classroom. I'm doing some leadership development with Ryan Hawk, who I co-authored Score That Matters with, and then one of our assistant coach at Centerville, Eli Liker, and Garen Stokes, who's a friend and a fellow coach as well. So doing some leadership development in kind of the corporate professional space, along with working with some coaches and some students still individually on the side from that.
Yeah, Brook, I came across your work with Ryan Hawk, and so I'm just really curious. I love the book, love both the books that I've read. I've been listening to Learning Leader podcast since Ryan started it years ago, and I'm really curious about how'd that relation start with Ryan?
So Ryan is a graduate of Centerville, which is where I teach at. And I'm not from Centerville. I came here 13 years ago. I came down to Centerville from Graham High School, which is actually my alma mater. It's where I grew up and everything. And I came down here to coach basketball and to teach. Got into leadership stuff. I started doing some leadership development stuff at the beginning of the day for team captains from different sports teams, and invited Ryan because I knew of him. I didn't know him personally, and just kind of cold emailed him and asked him if he'd come speak to our group of kids. And he did. And then, we went back and forth from there a little bit, and he asked me to speak at one of the workshops that he was doing. And then, kind of took off from there. We have a lot of similarities in how we view not only sports, but just leadership in general. So it was kind of a natural connection from that standpoint.
And that was the Surrender the Outcome, I think, was the book that you and Ryan authored together. Is that correct? No. The Score That Matters, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. The Score That Matters, we did together. Surrender the Outcome, I actually wrote first.
That's right.
And it was really I had no intention in publishing it, honestly. I was just kind of writing it was more therapeutic than anything. And so getting that kind of out of my head and really trying to better understand myself. The Score That Matters is the most recent one that Ryan and I did together.
And I thought it was a fascinating story. Sorry, Shane, real fast on the Score That Matters. I just love the story that you and Ryan told together, I think on the Learning Leader podcast, about how you actually sat down together for 8 hours and basically scripted out what you thought might be a video series. And then you looked at the script and you went, geez, we got a book here. What a cool way to write a book together in a day.
Yeah. Yeah. We just kind of were sitting there hashing out different things I had been teaching in class, things that he had talked about, or, experiences he had had with some of his interviews. And yeah, I remember him calling me and being like, hey man, I think instead of a video series, this should be a book. And I was just like, all right, let's do a book then. Sounds good.
It is. And is the video series coming too as a supplement to the book, or just sticking with the book?
Yeah, I think we're just sticking with the book right now. I think maybe in the future we'll put some videos and maybe some online stuff together.
Right. No, that's fantastic. I came across your book, Surrender the Outcome, and was, read through your story twice, the back of the book, just some unreal takeaways, and just like almost like mini workshops to work on yourself and take some time journaling and figuring out yourself. So you said it was therapeutic for you. And so just curious, that journey for you, like, I encourage all our readers, especially coaches and parents, to get the book. It's fantastic. It's a quick read. It's a good read. But yeah, just, I look at all the principles you and Ryan put in, the score that matters, and then I read Surrender the Outcome. And I think a lot of people think as coaches, we always have it figured out. But we're all on a journey as well. We started at point A. We're always trying to get to point B. We never really arrive. We're always just trying to improve and be better every day. I'm curious, just your story, we use the language here a lot of like transactional versus transformational in some ways. And just, you're really curious about your story from the start of that book into like where you're at now.
Yeah. So my first 7 years of coaching. So I when I got out of college, I was an assistant for 1 year, and then I was a high school basketball coach, and completely unqualified and a complete disservice to the kids I was leading at the time. Of course, I didn't think that then. I thought I knew everything. I thought I had it all figured out. But for those first 7 years, I would consider myself very transactional. Of course, you don't know that at the time either. You're going through it. I was basically just doing what everybody else was trying to do, win the next game. And so whatever that took, whatever that required, that was my measuring stick. That was my scoreboard. That was how I judged my worth and my value. And then, kind of like I talked through Surrender the Outcome, one of the really big tipping points for me was when I went to a Athletes in Action clinic where Dick Bennett spoke, longtime coach at Wisconsin, Plattsville, and then at Wisconsin, obviously. But and he talked about his 5 pillars, and it made sense to me that it was about more than winning. I had been searching for that because, the just trying to win and measuring myself based on that, it wasn't working. I knew it. I had gotten to a point where I knew I couldn't do that for 30 years or for the next 20 years. And I didn't feel any fulfillment. Even when you won a game, it was just, okay, how do you win the next game? Mm-hmm. And so that clinic set me on like a kind of a personal, exploration, or, whatever you want to call it, trying to just understand who I am, who I really wanted to be, and how I wanted to impact the kids that I was coaching. I know I love coaching. I knew that. But what did I want kids that were coached by me in our program to leave our program having grown in what areas, in what ways, what was important to me to be able to translate to them, and which I think is what makes you a transformational coach. How did I want to change them? Which I had never thought about prior to that, other than, you have good relationships, you like the kids, but it's just different when that's your purpose and that's your focus of doing it. So, now I mean, that's really, since that, about 7 years in, that's just been my focus as a coach. And we've won some, we've lost some. And honestly, I don't remember them as much as I used to. I just remember the relationships and the experiences, and the memories are always tied to some relationship. And that's what you start figuring out pretty quickly as you go down that path.
Yeah. And Dick Bennett obviously shared his 5, pillars. And I think at that point in time, I don't know if you had pillars yet yourself, or what did you do? How did you start? What did you pick up next to go, hey, I need some pillars, or I need some core values or something to start coaching this way?
Yeah. So Bennett's were very biblical. Like he basically just opened the Bible and said, what makes a good basketball player? That's kind of how he got to his.
Yeah.
I did it a little bit differently. I mean, I do have a faith piece to mine. I feel like that's important to what I do, and it's kind of my mission. But I just thought about, like, what's the best part of me? What's the most important things that I do? What do I value the most as a person? And then, because I think when you figure out what is the most important to you, you figure out what's the best of you that you can give to someone else. And so that led me eventually, not in a day, not in a week, not in a month, but eventually that led me to my core values. And my core values are the values of our program. And so I feel like, because it's almost like this is my mission, my pulpit is our program, right? That's how I spread what I believe is important to kids in their lives. And so I try to give the best I've got to give is the values that I live by and the things that I hold the dearest to my heart. So that's what I try to make sure I stay in touch with, and I try to convey to our players all the time.
Now, when figuring out your core values, and I had a mentor who was pushing me to define my core values so I could be, my authentic self and be real, because our programs in many ways are a reflection of us as head coaches.
Absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
And it took me a good 4 to 5 years to start solidifying them. And, I did find it a little bit ironic over the last couple of years. The chemistry, the buy-in on our program, as soon as we solidified those, we started moving in more of an upward unified trajectory.
Yeah.
What would you say to the coaches today? Because, like, I was one of those coaches that really struggled to identify my own core values. And at first, I'm not really sure if I believed it. The power of figuring that out and taking the time to actually work on myself and find that out. And then, now I'm a firm believer now, just because of what I've seen it do in my own program. But I read books like yours and Ryan's, and then I hear stuff, like Steve Kerr and Pete Carroll saying, like, to relentlessly do everything you can to figure out what your core values are before you move forward. So, like, what would you say to the coaches that are struggling or even questioning that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just ask them, who are they drawn to? Like, who are they personally drawn to as a leader? And it's easy, like, a lot of stuff gets glamorized in leadership, and it's like the halftime speech or the pregame speech or the real flashy guy on the sidelines. But that's not really what draws people to others. It's authenticity. Mm-hmm. That's who we're all drawn to. We're drawn to people that are real and who know who they are and are unapologetic about who they are and the mission and the direction that they're going. That's who we're really drawn to. And so I would say creating that awareness for people, and then helping them to go do that. Like, I think that process, it has to start internal. I think you look externally to see, what do you value in other people, but you can't stay external with it. It's got to come back to becoming an internal thing that you process, because if you're just trying to be somebody else, the best you are is a cheap imitation of that. And so you got to look out to see, well, there's reasons you admire people, for example, just like there's reasons you don't like people. Like, there's the reasons you don't like somebody. It's almost always because they violate a very core belief for you, whether it's laziness, dishonesty, whatever it is. It's because they violate something that's very personal to you. And that gives you a good indication of what matters. Same thing with the people you admire. You admire them because they hold a trait that you wish to have, an aspirational value that you wish to have at a high level that you wish to have it at. And so by looking out, you can get a good idea of those things that are important to you. So it is a hard sell for people, because a lot of times it doesn't come with immediate results. But my thing with that is nothing that's really good does.
Yeah. I think, you spoke in another podcast I listened to, and when it came to results, and I think it was speaking about the score that matters and what are we focused on. I think you had just even mentioned asking your class, like, do you control who gets, do you control your grade in this class? Yes or no? And I think a lot of your students thought they maybe did.
Yeah.
But you told them they don't. You do, actually, and if you don't like them, they may not get as good of a mark. And so it's pretty clear and simple. And I think even just what you said there, it lines up with that in regards to, you can't guarantee any results with anything. So going back to the score that matters, um, tell me a little bit about that. Like, what is the score that matters when you're speaking to a new group or your team for the first time, and you're introducing them to the score that matters? How do you define that to them?
Well, I think the first thing we always do is talk about what it's not.
Yeah.
It's not the final score of the game. It's not the scoreboard. It's not your income. It's not how big your house is. It's not what kind of car you drive. Like, it's not those things.
Right.
And then when you can eliminate those things, then you can start really thinking about what does matter. So we do a lot of different things for that. I mean, we do a eulogy exercise. I think kids, sometimes that's almost like too dramatic for them. But you could also do an end of the year banquet speech. Like, we'll have guys write down, like, what do you want the coaches and your teammates to say about you at the end of the year? And they'll talk about it. And they'll never say how many points they averaged. They'll never say how many rebounds they had. They'll never say that they were first team all conference. They'll talk about how they treated people, how they approached their work, how they persevered when things were hard. They talk about the right stuff. And so that's the score that matters. And then we just keep reducing it to a specific process that will lead us to that. And that's the score that matters for us. I love the framework of lead and lag measures. And I think a lead measure is something that happens before the result, that gives you a chance to have the result that you're aspiring to. A lag measure is after the fact. Score is a lag measure. That's measuring something that's already happened. So we want to try to focus on lead measures that lead us to where we hope to get. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but we feel good about that process that we approached it with.
Right.
I appreciated in the books, and it reminded me a lot of James Clear's stuff with Atomic Habits, talking about systems. And you guys talk about systems a ton in the score that matters. And I just love to get a snapshot of with your basketball program. So I got a lot of coaches that ask me, okay, like, so what does a week look like with your basketball program? And so, because most people think it's practices and games, and those are two major events, of course, but there's so many little things, different team time, different exercises that go into the week of a high school college basketball team. And I think some coaches just are so focused on the practice and the games, they miss those other things. So I'd love to get a snapshot, just Monday through Saturday or Sunday. What does that week look like for the systems that aren't so much basketball specific? Right. So, like, building that culture.
Yeah, I mean, we're very intentional with it.
Mhm.
First of all, so our core values of our program are tough, passionate, unified, and thankful, which are my personal core values. And so the question is, how can you create some systems around each one of those values to drive them through your program? How do you drive them through it? They can talk about it, you can put them on the walls, but there have to be specific systems that align with those values if you want that to be your culture, right? And culture is, a lot of people define culture in a lot of different ways. Culture is simply behavior. That's your culture is how your people act. That's culture, right? And so for us, we have some specific things like tough for us is a daily thing, and it is all about body language. And so we are very intentional about talking body language, how we sit in meetings, how we come on and off the floor, how we respond to a bad call, how we hold a teammate accountable, how we get held accountable by a teammate. So that's one of those things that is just, there's not a specific thing throughout the week for that. That's just an everyday, how you show up type thing. We have passionate, which is choosing extra work. So that's reinforced for us through, first of all, our breakfast club. So our guys work out every morning at 6. And all of our guys will be there, all of our varsity guys. It's not mandatory, but they come because that's the expectation that they have for themselves and for each other. And they're just working out, partner workout. Sometimes I give them some guidance. Sometimes I work with them. Sometimes I don't. I just stay out of the way intentionally. So they're hearing a different voice and they're taking ownership of their own development. So that's a very specific one that's clearly aligned with passionate. We also talk about passionate being our pace of practice. Like, how quickly do we get from one? Can we steal an inch by getting started quicker than somebody else might? Unified is speaking and acting with urgency. So we do several different things for this. Probably the clearest one that aligns with the value is our debriefs following practice. So we got that from the Blue Angels, but it's just, we'll give our guys a series of questions, or maybe just one question, or tell us something you did well, tell us something your teammate needs to do better, whatever it might be. But there'll be some sort of opportunity to speak and act with urgency throughout the practice. It's also a pretty big expectation within practice, is the communication piece. And then thankful, we'll count touches in practice. So our guys will give sometimes one of our managers two guys' names, and he'll just be counting that guy's touches through that whole practice. And then we'll report back. We'll talk about it. We have some requirements, some expectations of, if there's a turnover or a missed play or something like that, we go get a touch on the guy that had the play. But I think it's important that you look at the values that you want to drive, and then you create systems around those values that align. That to me is how you drive your culture.
That's great. I think, tell me a little bit about how you select your team captains. I heard this might be different than what I've seen traditionally done in the past. And you build a strong culture, so it must be built around captains, would be the assumption.
Yeah, that we don't have captains. So our expectation in our program is that everybody holds the standard, and everybody is in a position to hold the standard and hold others accountable for the standard. Now, obviously, on a team, you have guys that are naturally more vocal. So I always just say, if you want to know who your captains are, step back and watch for 5 minutes. You know who your captains are. Now, you don't need to put a C on their chest for that. Like, we'll honor our captains after the year, after the season. We'll talk about who our leaders were. But as far as the season goes, that's everybody's expectation. The captain can carry the water to the bus. The captain can sweep the floor. The freshman who is none of those things can tell the captain, like the senior, that he's not sprinting back on defense, that he needs to close out with his hands up. We want that to be universal. And so our effort is really to deconstruct the hierarchy that I think captains sometimes create. It's not always. You don't always get that when you name captains, but I found it to be more often than not, it creates a little bit of a hierarchy, and we want to try to demolish that.
I absolutely love that. My goodness. When I was listening to you talk about that on the podcast the other day, was unreal. When you talk about your core values, something that's really, and I'd never, maybe, anyways, I've got a master's in leadership. I've read hundreds and hundreds of books. And for some reason, I don't know why it hasn't stood out to me before, but the whole idea of like creating like a mantra or a phrase, a belief phrase to go with your values. And I'll be honest, I stole one of yours this morning when I was working out, because I didn't want to work out, and I just did it anyways. And like, so, tough, passionate, unified, grateful. The whole passion one, you have a belief linked to that called it's steal inches. So when we're passionate, we're always looking to steal inches. And so I had to reframe. It's like, no, I got to steal inches here. I got 15 more minutes, get her done, finish it. I'll be, anyways, just getting that, and so, I thought that was fantastic, of just putting a phrase to the core value to give it life, and you can use it in practices, in meetings, in games, in timeouts. It's almost, it makes it a verb, almost an action.
Yeah.
Like, so I love you to chat about that a little bit. And then you have a really cool story. And again, this is another thing I stole from you earlier in the year, and it worked. The whole attacking every opportunity with purpose. And that came with, I know there's a story with that from your 2021 state championship run. And that was a saying that, really propelled your team. And what I took away from that was like, by the end of the year, like your players had embodied that and were living it out. And you almost just had to you didn't even have to really, they were almost coaching themselves in some ways because you had like set the culture had gotten so strong by then.
Yeah. As far as the phrases go, I like to think of it as sticky language. Mm-hmm. And that, like, I think if you can find something that brings those things to life, like for us, tough is fight ready. So our guys say it all the time when we're getting ready for a game or like we're breaking the huddle right at the start of the game. Guys will always be saying, "Hey, fight ready now. We got to be fight ready, be ready to go, fight ready." And so it's cool when that, obviously when they start saying it, it's got some traction. But we steal inches with passionate. We don't flinch with unified, and don't flinch is say, like, you see it, you say it. That's the idea behind it. Don't flinch. You want to say, it's the right thing to say it. And then unified, thankful is show love, get touches. So just talking about showing love is probably the biggest one. As far as the attacking opportunities with purpose, that was actually our goal for that season. So talking about lead and lag measures, we set that in October. And we just tell our guys when we set a goal, like that's what they've established as their goal. And so it's our job as coaches to hold them to that. So if you want to attack opportunities with purpose, like that's a big goal, man. That I don't know how many games it's going to end up winning. I have no idea. But if you attack every opportunity with purpose, like what a life you're going to live, like what a team you're going to be on, like awesome. Right. And so that was kind of our calling card that year with our guys. Like, no. You said you want to attack opportunities with purpose. Let's go. Lace them up. Let's go. We're going to the weight room after a 2.5 hour practice. It's an opportunity. Attack it. Let's go. So we just kept putting it in front of them. And then it showed up in the state championship game in the final timeout. Our guys, the other team has the ball baseline out of bounds, down 1 with like 2.1 left, or maybe less than that. And our guys just came into the huddle like, hey, attack the opportunity with purpose. We got this. Like, attack it with purpose. And so it was pretty cool to watch. Like, we said it before our season started, and it come to the very last huddle of the season, and that's the thing you're talking about. That was cool.
That's an awesome story. It's I think, and it's probably a good reminder for coaches out there, young coaches getting into it, going, here's our dressing room. Let's put something on the wall, our core values. Let's put something there that looks good when recruits come in or anybody. But it's just, we got to be really careful about what we put on the wall if it's not something that we're intentionally talking about every single day. Right. And I'm going to guess attacking every opportunity with purpose or steal inches or some of these slogans are on your dressing room wall, but it sounds like it's something that you're referencing every day. And when they see it, they know what it means.
Yeah. The attack opportunities with purpose just makes me think about, like, our guys were running to that. Mm-hmm. Right. And if it's like win a state title, it's real easy for the opposite of that to sneak in at that time. Oh my God, if they hit a shot, like, we could lose. Right. And so you start running away from something. And I just think we're so much more inspired and committed and when we're running to something. And so when it can be kind of that lead measure that we're running to, and guys, they may have hit the shot. Like, doesn't mean we weren't running to it. It's okay. You do have to surrender the outcome a little bit in order to approach things that way. You got to be, because we lost those too. Like, we've been in the Final Four the last 4 years, and we only won the first time. And so we've been there and we've lost it too, which is cool. Like, that's part of it. We're good.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. And you're right. The purpose of every team when they form a team, whether it's U11 soccer or high school, varsity basketball, should be to win the championship. That's just kind of why we play. Those of us at our age know that. Herman Edwards did such an eloquent job on YouTube videos saying you play to win the game. I don't know if you guys remember that clip or not from ESPN, but it's as simple as that, right? So the rest of it, what we actually focus on, the score that matters, needs to be what we fill our teams with, and have them, like how you said, they're running towards that, as opposed to the other way, because that happens. We see people scared to play that last 2.1 seconds because they're scared. They don't want to go on the court. We've all coached players like that. So I think one of the pieces you had said this in a podcast that I listened to as well, but just this idea on the score that matters, and see if this jogs a memory for you or not, but the idea of competing and not comparing. And the reason why I remember it for me was I had a mentor named Jamie Gilbert a number of years ago, and he wrote a book called Compete, Don't Compare, and used to really focus on that. But if you maybe unpack that and what that might mean for a young athlete.
Yeah, I mean, this is really central to my purpose. My purpose is to inspire excellence over success, inspire people to strive for excellence over success. So excellence to me is your very best, like the best version of you. Success to me is always a comparison. It always comes back to a comparison in how society defines success. And so, part of my purpose is really just to help people understand that, like, the mission and the goal is just for you to become the very best version of yourself. That's it. Like, just become the best, as the best that you can be. And that doesn't mean you'll be better or worse than somebody else. You have to get to a point where, you can delay judgment and like fight the urge to compare and rank those things. I don't know. I think I personally, I think it comes from knowing yourself. That's why I kind of went on this whole thing with the score that matters and surrender the outcome. I think that is all rooted in being authentic and true to yourself, because I think we're drawn to compare when we're not strong and sturdy enough in who we are, not convicted enough in our beliefs and our values, and knowing that I'm going to be okay, even if that guy's ranked number 1 and I'm ranked number 21, I'm still okay. Doesn't mean he's a better person than me. Sure, he's a better hockey player than me, if that's what you want to say. But I even think that's debatable. Like, put me on a team. I just think none of that stuff really, when you really get down and you start digging in it, I just don't think it holds water. But society sure makes it seem like it does.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we're at the start of 2025. We're in the first quarter here of 2025. People are diving into New Year's resolutions and, maybe success-based outcomes that they're looking at and planning for their goals of 2025. And a little bit, I just, now we're talking to the listeners on our podcast that maybe are the working professionals, maybe they're the moms or the dads of the athletes that are also listening. And it's going, hey, if maybe our purpose or our goal for 2025 should just be attacking every opportunity with purpose and not a shiny red Corvette, or something, because we might find ourselves, a sales target or a goal of some sort that we might find ourselves running away from. Because isn't that what, the three of us in our, our pulpit or our ministry of sport and the opportunity that we have in our programs to influence the young men that we coach, is to prepare them for the world so that they don't fall flat on their face. And sometimes having these success-based goals can lead to that. And so maybe, Brook, in a really long question here, what's a New Year's resolution look like for you in the Cupps household?
Well, we don't make them, but
so I assumed as much. Yeah.
If we did, it would be on a process-based goal. And so, the way we set this up, like, we can take the, attack opportunities with purpose. Our goal for our season this year is to compete with discipline to our standard. That's our team's goal this year.
Nice.
But the way I think a good way to frame this is to think about what you want to achieve. So when we're presenting this to our guys, we say, okay, there's a 10-year-old little boy and his dad are there to watch you play. What do you want them to leave the game saying about our team? Right. So immediately it creates this idea of, like, who do we want to be? Who do we want others to see? And then we say, okay, yeah, we want to play really hard. We want to share the ball. We want to, whatever they say. And then the question that actually gets you to the goal is, okay, what do you have to do on a daily basis in order for that to be the most likely outcome, not the guaranteed outcome. So if I would say, if I'm trying to set a New Year's resolution, I would say, okay, well, what do I want? Like, I want to lose 25 pounds. Okay, then on a daily basis, what do I need to do in order for that to be the most likely outcome? Well, I got to eat right. I got to sleep right. I got to do those things. Yeah. And so you get yourself to that lead measure really quickly. And I also think you create the idea or the understanding that you're running to that instead of running away from it. I think you're moving towards something rather than trying to avoid something else by aligning it with the process rather than specifically the outcome. But in order to do that, you got to be willing to not get the outcome that you want sometimes.
That's
and
right.
Still be okay.
Yeah. But talk about stealing inches if you do.
Right.
But yeah.
Losing inches. I gotta, when you talk about becoming process oriented, and when you had that shift after the first 7 years of coaching, and again, if coaches reach out to me and ask about my story, and like, well, how long did that, like, so once you made that decision, we're going to change the way I coach. I have the aha moment. You hear the Bennett's talk and you're like, okay, something has to change here. How long would you say till you really started to getting momentum? Because like in my story, I tell people like I had my hit rock bottom, have my wake up call. But it took a couple years.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just, oh, we're just going to switch overnight and everybody's going to buy in and this is going to be lovely. Right. It was, you start putting in the systems and you learn, you screw up, but you keep going. What would you say to like coaches who are hearing this? Like, okay, I need to make a change. Where do I start? But then just a realistic outlook is like, well, how long does this take?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I think you gotta have some conviction in there, because it's so easy to just to go back to revert back to what you were before. But it took, in terms of our program and me being able to notice like a noticeable difference in how our players played, acted, practiced, interacted with each other. I think 3 years was really like, okay, we're different now. I will say I felt differently immediately.
Right.
I personally felt different because my purpose had changed. And your purpose, like, I knew, even though it wasn't coming out the right way, I knew what my intent was. I knew personally what I wanted for our guys.
Give you direction.
Yeah. And that changed. That was an immediate change.
Right.
And then within your program, when did you start seeing, like, was it a slow burn? Like, okay, we're starting to get a few guys buying in. We're starting to see us compete, buying into our values. Like, did it happen in that first year? Or was it over the course of a few seasons?
A few. It probably took 3 years before I noticed, like, I noticed a real transition in our guys. Now, I mean, the reality is you've got to get some of your best guys to buy into that, to be believers in what you're doing. And when you get that, that's when it shifts. So I did that at Graham. My last 5 years at Graham, we were kind of in that mode. When I came to Centerville, one of the reasons I switched jobs was I was like, okay, can I, like, it kind of shifted at Graham, like where I was from, everybody knew me. Can I go do this? Like, pick up and just go do this and implement this culture and this style somewhere else. And I was lucky. I mean, because I had great kids, like when I came here, but they bought in pretty quickly. And I thought within 2 years, like, we were like, we looked like I wanted us to look. We weren't great basketball players, but we acted, competed the way I wanted us to compete. Like, when I closed my eyes and looked at our team play, like they matched.
Well, and from my experience, there's no other way to do it. And yeah, it takes a while. It's not immediate gratification. But it's so worth it in the end to make that commitment. Be like, okay, am I in this for the long haul? And stack up those little wins day by day, month by month, season by season, and then all of a sudden it just clicks, and you're just there in practice and you're like, what's going on? This is awesome, right? And just being intentional about it, and you just kind of get goosebumps sometimes thinking about situations like that. I got a little bit of a self-serving question, because it's, a little well, we got you on the podcast. player one-on-ones. So this is probably like the next area where I'm still growing as a coach. And um, I say this because I just had an hour and a half impromptu one-on-one with one of my players with one of my red shirts yesterday. And it was very positive and very much needed. And it was a great conversation and very thankful for it. I have a blind spot sometimes, assuming my players are doing well. And sometimes they're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And especially coaching male, I coach men's basketball. Yeah. They can hide it pretty well.
Right.
And most men will go out there and they'll compete and practice, and it seems like everything's good, but off the court, maybe not so much. How intentional are you with just, I think it was Anson Dorrance or somebody talking about like constant collisions, like creating collisions in practice. So like, just so you're aware, or off the court, or you guys talk about in the book, understanding everybody's, I don't know if it was love language, but what drives them, and then trying to meet them where they're at. Like, how, again, with intentionality, how intentional are you with just creating those collisions with your players?
Yeah, very, very intentional. Like I try to get a physical touch in with all of our guys every day in practice, one way or another. We meet. I don't remember who told me this. It might have been Coach Cole. Sherry Cole used to be the coach at Oklahoma. Has become a good friend and a great mentor. But she asked me one time we were talking about something like this. She just said, "When's the last time you wish you had fewer meetings with a player? Like when's the last time like you?" And I was like, "That's a good point." Like I mean, you never go like, "Well, I wish I wouldn't have met with them so many times. I wish I wouldn't have." Stayed so in touch with what they were feeling. Now we do ours a little bit different, and I love the way ours work out. We meet most of the time. If I'm meeting with guys, I almost always meet with two at a time. We assign accountability partners at the beginning of our season, and so and what it's turned out a couple times is an AP will come tell me that his partner's struggling. So it almost gives me another source of feedback for each player. But we'll go in those meetings and we'll have a talk with us, but then I'll talk directly to, I would talk to you, Shane, about what you need to do better, what you could do, what you're doing well. And then I'll go right to Justin, tell him what he's doing well, what he's doing, could do better. We go through our values. How do you feel you're doing on tough? How do you feel? And we have those, but the partner is there hearing and listening to everything. And sometimes I'll be like, Shane, what do you think? You think Justin's body language is good? You think it's what it needs to be? So it opens up an avenue for some feedback and some honest conversation. I love doing them with their AP. For us, it's been really, really good.
Great idea. I love that idea as well. I just think, sorry to interrupt, but just that ability. There can be a chance where we find it with our one-on-ones that sometimes young athletes, they remember 10% of what was said, and possibly, or maybe they remember 30%, but only 10% actually gets back to maybe their parents or somebody in regards to what the coach communicated, or less. But having that AP with them, it kind of solidifies that. It creates that conversation loop. Also can keep the negativity from them spiraling. No, coach said this to me when they leave, and it creates more of a dissension inside of the room. So brilliant idea, putting that AP system together.
Give me something to think about. Well, that's good. I love that Sherry Cole quote. It just reminded me of like one of the quotes in your book. One of the exercises you guys talk about was I'm going to say this wrong, but I think you'll know what I'm talking about, is counting how many days you have left with that person. And I think so many times we think about, we're keeping track. Well, did I meet with this person? Because I have to meet with them so many times to get the outcome I want. Even our individuals can become outcome based, which is a dangerous place to be. But yeah, it really hit me to flip it and be like, well, actually, how many more opportunities do I have to meet with this player? Because this might be their last year with me, or maybe it's my parents who are getting older, or a loved one. That, I don't know what it was. It just kind of hit me harder. And just flipping the perspective around made it seem way more, no, I need to do this, be more intentional about this.
Yeah. the United States, or like we're one of the worst in the world about thinking of death and the end being such a bad thing, when if you really use it correctly, like it creates such urgency and such purpose with the things that you're doing. Just like that. Just like, I mean, when you start thinking about, like, I don't know how many more Christmases I'm going to have with my parents. Mm-hmm. Well, that could be, yeah, very make you sad, but it could also bring a ton of life to those that you do have left. Like, if you look at it like that, it's like, man. And then when they do pass, and how grateful are you? How thankful are you that you were aware of it and you were intentional about those last 5 Christmases that you had together? Like, it's life changing.
3 most motivational words you might hear is, "You're gonna die."
Right.
Right. Or they could be, if you use them properly.
They should be.
It's a Gary Vaynerchuk quote, for those of you know who Gary V is. But
yeah.
Yeah, I think, you said once, most people struggle to consistently be who they are. Can you explain what you mean by that, and why you think that is?
Well, the first reason I think it's true is because I'm not sure very many people really know who they are. So it's hard to be consistent with something you don't know. And so I think people bounce back and forth within, their authentic self and who they think other people want them to be. I think that's the place the majority of people are. And then there's people that do the work to figure out who they really are, what they really believe. I mean, it's just natural, man. You're surrounded by things pulling you away from your authentic self. And so if you're not intentional about it, you get sucked in. And before long, you look back and you're like, what was I doing? Right. And so I just think it's a combination of those two things that are very powerful. And I think you've got to eliminate a lot of things in order to stay authentic. And I think you've got to be very intentional moment to moment in order to live that way.
I'm guessing this is what drives that, again, something you've written, that excellence is mundane, and that the importance of building systems into your day. That's probably the intentionality needed. And we need systems or habits, kind of, Shane had mentioned a little bit of the atomic habits, feel in the score that matters as well. And if we have those systems in our day, that's going to allow us to be intentional about living our authentic self.
Yeah. Yeah. The consistency is it's like the greatest superpower that nobody wants to talk about it. Like, everybody wants to talk about all the things. Yeah. It's hard to show up every day over and over and over and just keep doing the things that are productive and good for you. And it's not glamorous. It's not on Sports Center. It's just day after day after day after day.
Mm-hmm. But as men and as coaches and leaders, we're asking that of the young men that we lead. Like, we're asking them to show up every day in practice and be consistent. We got to model it.
Yeah.
It's really important.
100%. Okay. Brooke, I noticed a few times in the books or in podcasts, you just mentioned, and the Bennett's and their pillars coming from the Bible and stuff. And I assume you're a man of faith, and just curious, like, how important your faith is when it comes to just driving all of this. Like, you partner with Ryan and his business, doing all these things, doors are opening. I'm hearing more and more people in the sports world talking about their faith. And I just find, like, how much does that play a part in what drives you?
I mean, it's the driving factor for me. I mean, I view this, I think Justin said it, to me, this is my ministry. Like, this is how I can pour into others. It's what I feel like, God's calling me to do. It's my way of honoring him through my service, my coaching, my example of what I'm doing. So, when I say excellence over success, excellence to me is that life in faith and in Christ. And so I just think, like, when you're trying to find your purpose, if that's not a component to it, man, good luck.
It's empty.
Like, good luck. Yeah. It's just, I also believe, I'm not the closer for everybody. To use the kind of a pitching term, like, I'm not the closer. I'm not going to get everybody to their knees, but hopefully I can bring you closer. Sometimes I'm middle relief. Sometimes I'm the starting pitcher, and every once in a while I get to be the closer. And those are the awesome times. But just recognizing that I just try to be a positive vehicle on everybody's journey, because I really do believe everybody gets there. I think everybody makes the trip, just a matter of when. And my hope is to help them make the trip earlier so they got more of their life to live, there, instead of, just making that decision on your deathbeds. Short trip.
No, fantastic. Maybe a little bit personal or vulnerable, whatever, but we'll see what you say. Greatest accomplishment moment looking back on your coaching career where you'd be like, because I think a lot of people often think of, that championship or this, whatever. Is there a moment that kind of you look back on that just kind of gives you, the goosebumps and just satisfaction of like, wow, like this happened?
Probably coaching my son.
Cool.
Yeah. Now we were like, he was a sophomore on that state championship team. So we hugged at half court. That was pretty cool. But really, I think the best memories with him were just like him being little and celebrating stuff on the bench, like a little wild banshee. I'll go back and watch old films every once in a while, and he's running out on the court, chest bumping guys. And those are to me the coolest memories.
Yeah. I get to drive my kids are a little older than Justin's, but just the amount of time we spend in the car, I almost find the drive, because we have some long drives, to and from games and practices, or some of the more special times where you really connect. And then seeing my boys excited about like my college team and want to watch and play and come to practice is exciting. And then next question was, what's your biggest regret if you have one? And I know we all learn from our regrets and how we frame that, but is there something where you're just like, yeah, that was tough?
I think taking away just like a certain game or anything like that, I feel sometimes I'll see those guys that I coached in my first 7 years, and I feel so bad. I feel like I robbed them of such a cool experience and such an opportunity, because I wasn't ready to do it the right way.
I can relate.
I think a lot of us, there's a lot of coaches that can, and a lot of us can. But there's lots been written, whether it's Joe Ehrmann's Inside Out Coaching book or others, that we only know how to coach the way we were coached. Sometimes we don't know how to father the way we were fathered, and it's a matter of doing that inside work. And I think you did that at that AIA conference with Dick Bennett, and came back and did that deep dive into yourself to go, who is my authentic self, and what does it feel like to be coached by me, and what do I want them to experience, and made some intentional changes.
Isn't that such a good question from Joe Ehrmann's Inside Out Coaching? How does it feel to be coached by me? Man, that gave me so much perspective, and some like that. That sent me on some crazy like realizations.
It's amazing how a good question, like you just talked about, like Sherry's question, that's how she probably answered the question with a question.
Yeah.
And those questions that Joe has in the book, and it's just like, man, it's just smack you in the face or punch in the gut and send you on this trajectory. Makes you think about how we coach.
Right.
Makes you think how we coach. Do we tell or we ask questions? I don't know. Yeah.
It does. And at the same time, we're all on this journey, and there's moments in it, as a dad, where I like, what does it feel like to be parented by me? And, maybe yesterday it didn't feel that darn good. And so it's like, what am I doing? How am I doing the inside work on me? Right. So even as we're talking about coaches, but even as we make it about ourselves, I think, I've heard of coaches that put a video, they have this like almost Corella DeVille moment. It's like, hey, we're going to do this inside work. I want to be this transformational coach. And then they get on the court, on the sidelines or on the bench, and it's like everything changes. And so I've even heard of, coaches who have a mentor coach that tosses a camera up in the stands or puts a microphone on their lapel of their jacket. And, hey, it's going to be painful, but tomorrow morning we're going to watch only you. That's the film that we're going to review, is just you and your actions and what you said under your breath or sideways comment to one of your players, and just see what it feels like. There was a really cool video circulating right now about Coach Kevin O'Connell. I think he's the quarterback coach of the Minnesota Vikings with
head coach,
he's the head coach, sorry, with Sam Darnold, and just him talking to Sam and just how he empowers him. It was just a beautiful thing to see. So if a listener is here and they want, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube.
That's a cool video.
It's a really cool video. And I just loved how it's like, he's empowering Sam as a leader, not only by calling him up and speaking him and encouraging him, but saying, hey, now when your players come to your huddle, you need to do this, say these things, right? And it's like, because you need to lead these men out here. 11 men on the field, right? NFL, different than the CFL. But anyway, it's important that we do a little bit of this self-awareness, this deep dive. That's going to take some time for us to really find out who our authentic self is, to spend some quiet moments. And sometimes that's scary, spending quiet time with ourselves. Brook, this has been an awesome interview so far. And before we sign off, I want to make sure if there's any other questions or anything here too. And
thank you for the books you've written, the articles you're writing on your blog, and I hope you guys keep sharing and creating content and putting it out there, because it's been these 2 books over the Christmas break were what I needed, and thank you for doing that. And they're both. I always measure a book by, are they? Do I want to read them more than once? And these definitely do. And so that they're helping me become a better coach and better dad and better husband. So I appreciate you coming on here and chatting with us.
I appreciate that. Thanks for all the kind words, Shane. Thank you.
Yeah, Brooks. And likewise, I think yesterday I was listening to a podcast and you started it by just saying, the conversation about success and just this idea that the best time you had was at a hotel lobby playing Uno with your kids. And you realize it doesn't get much better than this. And are we investing enough that they'll come back and spend time with us? And that gave me perspective yesterday in the midst of, business dealings and different things going on. And that little moment was, I got to build Lego last night, and that was the coolest part of my day.
That's right.
It's good. So
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Grit and Growth Podcast. We hope that you enjoyed today's guest and the answers that they were able to give and the stories they were able to tell. If you did enjoy today's episode, we'd ask that you would just follow or subscribe to our podcast. It does help us get the word out in our message. Thanks again. Have a great day.